There is a place on the west coast of New Zealand where the first thing you notice is not a house or a street or even the view. It is the drop. Stand near the old breakhead at Denniston and the land seems to fall away too suddenly, as if the plateau has been cut off with a knife. Below you is the coastal plain. Beyond that is the Tasman Sea. Behind you is a cold, wet, stony landscape that looks too exposed for a town. And yet, for decades, families lived here. Not beside the hill, on top of it. About 600 meters above sea level, on a plateau that could be swallowed by mist, battered by wind, and soaked by west coast rain, people built cottages, shops, schoolrooms, sports grounds, and ordinary routines. The question is simple. Why would anyone put a town here? The answer is a machine. Or more exactly, a steep cable railway that carried coal wagons down from the clouds. This is Denniston, once one of the hardest places to live in New Zealand, and one of the most important coal places in the country. Today, the old incline is broken, the town is mostly gone, and the plateau looks quiet. But if you follow the track, the story still has weight. It is a story about engineering that made an impossible place profitable. It is a story about a community that learned to live where comfort was almost an afterthought. And it is a story about what happens when the machine that gives a place its purpose finally stops. My name is Graham, and this is one of those New Zealand places where the landscape does not explain the story until you understand what moved through it. Start with the geography. Denniston is near Westport on the South Island's west coast. The coal was not lying conveniently beside a port or a railway line. It was up on the Mount Rochfort Plateau, above the settlement of Waimangaroa, in a place that made transport the central problem. Coal underground is only valuable if it can leave. That was the puzzle. The Westport coal field had high-quality coal, but the plateau edge was steep, wet, and awkward. A normal railway could not simply wander up there in a gentle curve. Roads were poor, pack tracks were slow. The coast was close enough to make shipping possible, but the coal first had to get from the plateau to the railhead below. So the company used gravity. The Denniston Incline opened in the late 19th century as a self-acting cable railway. Full wagons of coal went down. Their weight pulled empty wagons back up. At the top, a brakeman controlled a system of ropes, drums, brakes, and water resistance, trying to turn a frightening slope into a predictable transport system. On paper, it sounds clean. In real life, it was dramatic. The incline dropped more than 500 meters over about 1,670 meters of track. Some grades were so steep that the line became less like a railway and more like a controlled fall. There were two inclines, an upper and a lower, with the wagons exchanged at a place called Middle Break. That name matters. Denniston was not just a mine, and not just a town. It was a chain of places connected by motion. Mine, tramway, breakhead, upper incline, middle break, lower incline, Cons Creek, railway, Westport, ship. Every part had to work. If the machine worked, coal from a lonely plateau could reach the sea. If the machine failed, the settlement above it was stranded. That is the first twist in the story. Denniston was not built where life was easy. It was built where the transport system made life barely possible. Before the road was built, access was brutal. People and goods could go up by steep track or by the incline itself. Imagine arriving in a place where the most direct route is the same machine used to move coal wagons. That is not a romantic beginning. It tells you what mattered. Coal mattered first. Comfort came later, if it came at all. The settlement grew because the coal was worth the inconvenience. The Westport Coal Company and the shipping networks that used its coal helped make Denniston part of a larger industrial system. This was not an isolated curiosity. Coal from this hill fed boilers, ships, industry, and transport. A place that looked like the edge of the map was tied into the machinery of colonial New Zealand, but the people living on the plateau paid the local price. Denniston was exposed. The weather was not a background detail, it shaped daily life. Fog could close in. Rain could sit over the plateau. Wind could make the place feel less like a settlement than a test of endurance. The soil was thin and poor. The ground was rocky and wet. Gardens were difficult. The ordinary comforts that soften a town were not easily available. Early houses were small and basic, often built from timber, corrugated iron, and whatever could survive the place. Water, sanitation, and space were problems. Families lived close to the mine and close to each other, but not necessarily close to comfort. That is easy to flatten into misery from a distance. But the more interesting truth is that people did not only endure Denniston, they made it into a community. There were schools, there were shops, there were hotels. There were social rooms, sports grounds, dances, clubs, arguments, rivalries, habits, and local pride. Children grew up with the Incline not as a tourist spectacle, but as part of the daily geography. The view that visitors admire now was, for residents, sometimes just the edge of home. And that is the second twist. The same isolation that made Denniston harsh also made the community tight. When the weather closed in, people knew what it meant. When the mine was dangerous, everyone understood the stakes. When the incline was working, it was not an attraction, it was the artery of the place. Life on the plateau produced a strong sense of belonging because it had to. You could not live there casually. But belonging did not erase conflict. Denniston was also a workplace, and the workplace was hard. Coal mining was physically demanding, dangerous, and controlled by company systems. The settlement was close-knit, but it was not equal. Management and workers did not experience the hill in the same way. That tension made Denniston important beyond its coal output. In 1884, Denniston became a key place in the development of coal mining unionism in New Zealand. Workers pushed for better conditions, safer work, and fairer treatment. The isolation of the hill did not make politics disappear. It concentrated them. This is one of the reasons Denniston matters historically. It is tempting to tell the story only as engineering. Steep line, clever brakes, wagons moving through mist. But the incline was also social machinery. It decided how people arrived, how supplies came in, how coal left, how much the company could produce, and how dependent the town was on the system below it. The machine created the town. The town created a community. The community created pressure for dignity. That chain is easy to miss if you only look at the ruins. Now picture the incline at work. A loaded wagon waits near the top. An empty wagon is attached to the other side. The ropes are set. The brakeman has to manage a descent where gravity is not an assistant so much as a force waiting to run away. The full wagon starts down. The empty wagon starts up. The cable tightens. The drums turn. The brakes resist. The whole system depends on balance, timing, and trust. For decades, this was ordinary. Ordinary does not mean safe. Runaways and accidents were part of the memory of steep industrial transport. The point is not that the system was reckless for its time. The point is that the entire settlement accepted a level of exposure that would feel almost unreal today. At Denniston, the line between daily life and industrial risk was thin. The landscape kept reminding people of that. The plateau did not become gentle because people lived on it. The weather did not become kind because children walked to school. The incline did not become less steep because it was used every day. That is what makes the place powerful now. Modern visitors arrive by road. They walk among interpretation panels, old stonework, rusting relics, fragments of track, foundations, and open ground where buildings once stood. It can feel peaceful, almost scenic. But the quiet is misleading. Denniston was not quiet when it was alive. It was metal, cable, coal dust, rain, boots, whistles, loaded wagons, work shifts, arguments, children, washing, smoke, school bells, union meetings, and the constant awareness of the hill. The decline came slowly, then decisively. Coal demand changed, transport changed, mining changed. A place built around a particular industrial system could not easily reinvent itself once that system lost its central role. The Incline closed in 1967. That date is the hinge. For nearly 90 years, the Incline had turned an exposed plateau into an economically useful place. Once it stopped, Denniston was no longer the same kind of settlement. Production reduced. People left. Buildings were removed, decayed, or disappeared into the scrub and weather. Mining continued in different forms on the wider plateau, but the old town was finished as a working community of that scale. That is the third twist. Denniston did not vanish because nobody understood its value. It vanished because its value had been tied to a machine, a fuel, and an industrial world that moved on. The people who loved the place could preserve memory, but memory could not keep the Incline operating as the center of life. Today, Denniston is recognized as a Category 1 historic place. The Department of Conservation looks after key parts of the area, and local people have worked to keep its stories visible. The old school building and the Friends of the Hill Museum are part of that effort. But preservation here is difficult. The same weather that shaped the town keeps working on the remains. Vegetation grows back, metal rusts, timber fails. Visitors can damage what is left without meaning to. Old mine areas can be dangerous. The place needs care because it is not a tidy museum object. It is a landscape of fragments, and fragments require imagination. You have to stand at the breakhead and rebuild the motion in your mind. You have to look at a foundation and imagine a house full of damp clothes and coal smoke. You have to see a track through scrub and understand that it was once part of a working industrial network. You have to look down the incline and realize that this was not a scenic lookout first. It was a transport problem solved at human cost. That is why Denniston is more than a ghost town. It is a place where New Zealand's industrial history becomes physical. You can feel the problem in the slope. You can see the answer in the relics. You can sense the price in the emptiness where the town used to be. There is also a deeper question here. What happens to a community when the reason for its location disappears? Some towns sit beside rivers, fertile land, or sheltered harbors. Their purpose can change because the place still offers other advantages. Denniston was different. Its location made sense because coal had to come down from the plateau. The town was not there despite the incline. It was there because of the incline. When that central logic ended, the settlement could not simply become an ordinary town. It was too exposed, too high, too difficult, too tied to a working system that no longer worked in the same way. That is why the ruins feel honest. They do not pretend the past was easy. They show a place that existed because people were willing to build lives around a hard bargain. Good coal, harsh ground, dangerous transport, strong community, limited comfort. Denniston answers the question in a way that is both practical and uncomfortable. Why would anyone put a town here? Because the coal was here. Because gravity could move it. Because industry was willing to ask families to live at the top of the system. And because, once people arrived, they did what people always do. They made routines. They made pride. They made arguments. They made memory. The machine is silent now. The wagons no longer move down through the mist. The rope does not tighten. The brake drums do not turn. The coastal plain below no longer waits for Denniston coal in the same way. But the hill still holds the shape of the old bargain. A town on the edge. A railway that was almost a controlled fall. A community that learned to live where the landscape kept saying no. If you visit, stay on the tracks, read the panels, watch the weather, and give the place more time than a lookout stop. Because Denniston is not only about what remains, it is about what had to happen, day after day, for a town to exist in a place that never made living easy. And once you understand that, the empty plateau does not feel empty anymore. It feels like the machine has only just stopped echoing.